your thoughts, not just on today's announcement, but on the 2 decades that America's military has spent fighting in Afghanistan.
Thanks, Nicole. I will start by simply saying I think there are so many hundreds of thousands of us whose boots will carry the dust of Afghanistan forever. A 20-year war brings a lot of Americans into the fight. And I would say everyone who served there came away with a sense of the Afghan people, a sense of the sheer physical beauty of the country. And I would say almost all of us would shake our heads and say, this is a country that deserves better. The people deserve better. The culture of Afghans and deserves a better ending than I think is coming for them. So when I hear the president, I get it. I understand the Middle East fatigue and particularly the Afghan fatigue in the country. If I were advising the president, however, I would have said, you know, sir, we've already brought the troops home from Afghanistan. When I commanded that mission, there were 150,000 international troops and 100,000 American troops. Today, there are only 2,500 American troops and almost 3 times that Allied troops there. So it's now, Nicole, a relatively small footprint. We haven't had a combat death in 14 months. And I would have said to the president, continue the negotiation. What has changed is that for the first time, we actually have the Taliban at the table. I don't know if the outcome is going to be better or worse, but I do know as a military officer, it's never a good idea to tell your opponents, we will be off the field by this date certain. So I'll conclude an opening thought, which is what's really important is, OK, the president's made his decision. We're going to salute we, the military, and carry it out, of course. The question is, what happens after September 11th of this year? I hope that we will continue to fund the Afghan security forces. In Vietnam, we had from 1972 to 75, we funded the Vietnamese. It was 75 when we cut off the funding that the helicopters lifted off from the embassy famously. We can avoid that, I think, by continuing to fund the Afghans, keeping a strong embassy, being in touch with our allies, partners, and friends, and continue to push. But I'll close. Everybody who has served there today, I think, looks out a window and just feels a sense of sadness about what appears to be a failure.
Admiral Stavridis, you're obviously so important to us in helping us understand, obviously, what the viewpoint might be from active duty military. But can you say whether or not this was what you're articulating was the advice given to President Biden by the military?
I certainly am not privy to those particular conversations. What I can tell you is I put myself in that filter. We heard from Dave Petraeus today, who commanded that mission, with thoughts, I believe, similar to my own. I think there are plenty of us who were in the crucible of Afghanistan with whom I have spoken. I know what advice they would have given. I suspect also our wonderful military will fight and fight until the end. Sometimes it takes a political leader to say, you got to know the difference between quitting and getting beat. I don't like to think we've gotten beat here. I think we can still make progress by working with and funding the Afghans, but doing it from over the horizon.
Mark, the White House is very defensive on a lot of these points and very eager to point out that indefinitely is not, in this president's view, an option. The detractors to today's policy announcements will say basically what Admiral Stavridis just said, that it's a very small force and they're there to ensure our national security, to make sure that it does not again become a haven for terrorists. Where do you come down?
Well, I want to follow up on something my former boss in Afghanistan, Admiral Stavridis, said. And you're talking about 2,500 troops, American troops, and a couple thousand more Allied troops. In fact, our NATO allies and our Resolute Support partners have had more forces than we've had since December of 2020. But what we forget is that our American forces have a disproportionate political impact. It's American forces there that underwrite the peace negotiations that are going on around the table. It's American forces that underwrite the ability of development agencies to continue their work that will continue for years and for decades. I was just reminded today that we still have 500 American troops in Bosnia, and that's years ago. This deployment is not preventing the United States from dealing with greater strategic challenges. And likewise, if we get to a settlement, what's to say we won't be part or shouldn't be part of some international military presence guaranteeing that peace agreement? So I think this is the wrong decision. I am grateful that we have a president who understands the sacrifice that our troops have made over there. But I just think that he has been given by his team a false binary choice. Either we stay indefinitely with a massive commitment or we leave. And there's a lot of areas in between, a lot of work we can do that is beyond that binary choice.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.